Hi BookTube, my name is Sarah and welcome to the Bookish Knitter. Today I am coming to you with my 2021 wrap-up and stats video and all my 5-star reads. So I am really delayed on this. For you guys who have been watching my weekly vlog videos, you know I've been sick for the last couple of weeks, so extra videos have not really been a big thing for me right now. But I definitely, of course, wanted to do my wrap-up video for the year. So essentially this is going to be in like the same vein as my monthly wrap-ups, where I'm going to go through all of my stats, but it'll be for the entire year. And then at the very end, I'm going to share with you guys all the books that were 5-star reads for me. So that's exciting. So we'll start off with reading stats, you guys. So first of all, I read 247 books in 2021. Yay! Of those 247, 210 of them were new to me reads. 37 of them were rereads. My Goodreads goal was 150, which is what it is again this year. So I hit 165% of my Goodreads goal. That's not too shabby. So in terms of star ratings, I had 2 2-star reads, 5 2.5-star reads, 29 3-star reads, 67 3.5-star reads, 92 4-star reads, 34 4.5-star reads, and 17 5-star reads, which is, I think, the biggest number I've had in the last few years. I think last year it was something like 13. You guys know I do not hand out 5-star reviews lightly. So for a book to hit a 5-star for me, really was special for some reason. So yeah, 17 of them this year, or in 2021. That's pretty good. So my average star rating for the year was 3.82, which is really good. You know, I had some really great reads this year. Like the bulk of my reads were 3.5 or three stars and above, which is fantastic. So in terms of what I read, in terms of genre, and there's a lot of them, guys. Sorry for shaking the camera. I read like a bit all over the map this year, or in 2021, which was kind of fantastic. If I keep saying this year, you know what I mean. So I read 94 contemporary romances. There is no surprise there. That's my bread and butter. I read 40 middle grade fiction novels. And I think part of that was middle grade March, and the other one was rereading through the Babysitters Club books. I read 24 cozy mysteries, 23 romantic suspense novels, 12 historical romances, 9 thrillers, that surprised me, 7 historical fiction, 5 women's fiction, 5 paranormal romance, 5 inspirational romance, or inspirational romantic suspense, 4 inspirational romances, 4 YA contemporary, 3 chick lit, 3 nonfiction, 2 classics, 2 memoirs, a mystery, like I don't know what I would have just tagged as a mystery, but whatever, an erotic novel, 1 fantasy romance, 1 science fiction, and 1 horror. So good for me. I read quite a bit. I also like to keep track of how many category romances I read, which are all of my Harlequins. So I read 23% of what I read last year was category romances, which is fantastic. It's almost a quarter. I think that number's fantastic. So clearly I have some favorites when it comes to which categories I like. 15 of the intrigue novels, 9 special edition, 5 heartwarming, 5 desire, 5 romantic suspense, 5 love-inspired suspense, 5 Blaze novels, 4 Harlequin Presents novels, 2 love-inspired novels, 1 historical, which surprised me that I only read 1 Harlequin historical last year, 1 super romance, and a dare, which I'm pretty sure was the erotic novel that I mentioned earlier. And guys, that one was a great book, by the way. That was a fantastic book. So in terms of age range that the books were meant for, so I read 199 books that were geared towards an adult audience, 42 middle grade, and 6 YA. So in terms of the years published, I read 1 book published prior to the 1920s, 1 published in the 1930s, 1 in the 1980s, 39 books published in the 1990s. Again, I'm pretty sure those were the Babysitters Club books. 9 books published in 2000, like in the 2000s, 64 books published in the 2010s, 53 books published in 2020, 78 books published last year in 2021, and a single book published this year in 2022. But I read it last year, so that's pretty cool. how I consumed my books. 114 were ebooks. No surprise there. I love my e-reader. Pry it out of my cold dead hands. I love my e-reader. 103 books were on audio. 20 were mass market paperbacks. 7 were trade paperbacks. 2 graphic novels and a single hardcover. So now into the series. 183 books that I read last year were part of a series. Clearly, I am a series reader. You guys know this. 63 of them were standalone books. So, nah. 15, okay, so out of those 183 that were part of a series, 59 books were series that I started. Brand new series. We all know how I do with that. 121 were part of ongoing series, so that's not too bad. And I only completed 3 series last year, you guys. That number's bad. That number's bad. But it's not a race. We're not, playing against anybody else. This is all for fun. This is all just for us. So I'm not really worried about it. So in total, I read 69,539 pages in 2021. Averages out to roughly about 191 pages a day. It's not too shabby. So for some random fun stats before I get into the 5-star reads. So the highest rated book on Goodreads that I read. So again, this is the book that has the highest ratings on Goodreads. I had to really look at this to make sure that I was getting the right number, because these can be, even when you sort your books by this, it can sometimes be off, and it's best just to make sure that the one at the top is the highest number or the highest rating. The highest rated book on Goodreads, I was so happy about this, is Second Chance Cowboy by Claire McEwen. It has an average Goodreads rating of 4.70 stars, and I gave it 4 stars. This is a Harlequin heartwarming novel, you guys. I love this book. I thought it was absolutely delightful. Check it out if you love a good, sweet romance. This one was fabulous. The lowest rated book on Goodreads was Likes Cats and Dogs by Kate McMurray. This one has an average star rating of 2.96 stars. I gave it 2.5 stars. I did not care for this book. I read it towards, I think it was in the fall. And yeah, I just was not happy with it at all. The longest book that I read in terms of page length was A Good Old-Fashioned Cowboy by Maisie Yates, Caitlin Cruz, Nicole Helm, and Jackie Asherden. This has a page count of 473 pages. This book was delightful. It is an anthology of 4 connected stories. So it's not like it's an anthology where it's like a bunch of stories just kind of tossed in there. These were all interconnected with each other. You did need to read it as one standalone novel. It was fabulous. And all 4 of those authors are favorites of mine. It was great. The shortest book that I read. So this is kind of a little weird because this is only available on audio as far as I know. But for some reason, Goodreads lists a page count of 38 pages. It's an hour long, an hour and a half long on audio, I think. And it's If the Fates Allow by Rainbow Rowell. It was okay. It was the first book I read in December. Super, super short. I think I listened to it during my drive to work one day. But like I said, Goodreads listed at 38 pages. So I'm counting it as my shortest book of the year. The average number of pages per book. So again, I read, over 69,000 pages, 247 books. It works out to about 282 pages per book that I read last year. So that's not too bad. And just for fun, I added these 2 little things in. Of all the books that I read, 72 of them were ARC copies that I got from NetGalley or from the publisher or from whoever. It was an ARC. 65 of the books that I read came from my library, which was pretty awesome as well. So apologies, friends. I had to stop the video very quickly and do something, but I'm back now to share with you guys all my 5-star reads of 2021. So like I said, there were 17 of them. I do have some here physically. So the ones I don't, I of course will insert a picture. And I'm not going to talk a lot about what all of these books are about. I will leave the list below in case you guys want to go check them out for yourself. And obviously, if I gave them 5 stars, then clearly they were something that I really, really enjoyed. So let's get into it. So the very first book that I have on this list, now this list is not in order of which ones I like the most to the least. These are literally the order that I read them in 2021. So my first 5-star read of 2021 was Pursuit of the Truth by Katie Richards. This is the first book in the West Investigation series. It is a Harlequin intrigue, Brie and I like to say this is the book that started the Categorically Romance podcast because both her and I read it, both of us loved it, and there were not a ton of ratings on it on Goodreads. And we're like, people are sleeping on these books because they're so good, like just the Harlequin books in general. So, yeah, this was kind of the book that started the podcast. I love this one. It was a great, great romantic suspense. Of course, highly recommend. The next one I read in March, and it was Alone by Megan E. Freeman. I read this one for middle grade March. It is told in verse. So it's a very, very quick read. It looks like a chunkier book, but it's a very quick read. It's about a young girl who, after something happens, this thing happens in her town. She wakes up in the morning and no one is in town anymore. Everyone's been evacuated from this town for whatever reason. And she has to survive alone. She finds a dog, and for many years, actually. And it was fantastic. There are some parts in here that were like, for those of you who might be sensitive to animal abuse, there's a couple parts in this that I found very difficult to read because that's something for me that I find very difficult to read about. But outside of that, it's a very, very small part of the book. This book was fantastic. I absolutely recommend it. The next one that I read is The Bachelor Girl's Guide to Murder by Rachel McMillan. I also read this one in March for March Mystery Madness. This was a reread for me. I love this book. It's set in Toronto in 1910, and it's about two girls who are bachelors. And the one girl, Miranda, is it Miranda? Miranda. She fancies herself as a Sherlock Holmes kind of character. And this book was delightful. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was so, so cute. Again, it's a reread for me. I think the biggest thing, this is the first book in the Herringford and Watts mystery series. There's like 4 books in the series, I think. And I think what I found totally charming about it is because it is set in my hometown and historically in my hometown. So to see a lot of the areas that they talk about, and are they still around? Are they still not? You know what I mean? So that part of it, I think, just added to the charm of it for me personally. But even outside of that, I just thought it was an absolutely delightful book. The next one is another one I have a physical edition of. Sorry, I didn't put these books in order when I set them down here. We have The Sea in Winter by Christine Day. This I also read in March, again for middle grade March. This one was really, really good. It is about a young girl who, it says, from the author of I Can Make This Promise comes a tender story about a native girl struggling to find her joy again and the family who will protect her no matter what happens. So she is a ballerina and she ends up like hurting her leg or her ankle. I can't remember. Anyway, she falls into this depression because she can't dance. And her family decides to take this trip, and it's kind of her struggle with the depression and things. It was fantastic. I loved this so much, and I absolutely recommend that everybody check it out. If you're looking for something to read for middle grade March for this year, like I definitely recommend this one and Alone. And I am looking forward to March Mystery Madness for middle grade March. And I'm looking forward to more great middle grade books this year in 2022. The next one is another physical edition that I have. This one, oh my gosh. I know I said that I probably was not going to have favorites of the year, but I do have to say that this one and another one on the list were probably my top 2 if I had to pick. So the next one that I finished in April was The Four Winds by Kristen Hanna. This was fabulous. I know this one was really mixed with reviews for people because a lot of people found it very depressing, but to be fair, it takes place during the Great Depression. So it's not exactly meant to be a happy unicorns and rainbows type story. But if you are a fan of historical fiction, this was amazing. I love this so much. It's about a family who it takes place during the Dust Bowl, who travel from Oklahoma to California for a potentially better life. And what ends up happening, a good chunk of the book takes place in California, and what happens with them there, with everybody kind of leaving the Oklahoma area, Texas area, to go to California, and how California is now overrun with what they call migrant workers and things like that. So it was really, really, really good. I absolutely loved it. Like I said, this one and another one I would have to say are definitely probably my top 2 books of the year. I'll tell you the other one once I get to it. So the next one on my list is another book that I read in April, and it is Wildflower Season by Michelle Major. Again, read it in April, really enjoyed it. A great contemporary romance. This is the first book in the Carolina Girls series. It takes place in the same small town that the Magnolia Sisters series that she wrote took place in as well. I loved this one. You do meet the main character in this book in the Wildflower Girls series, but you don't have to have read that series to read this one, although I do recommend it because Michelle Major is just a fabulous author, and I absolutely loved this book. The next one was another middle grade book, but I didn't read this one until April, and this is Macy McMillan and the Rainbow Goddess by Sherry Green. I listened to this one on audio. It was so sweet. It was about a little girl who befriends this elderly neighbor next door, and I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, is the little girl deaf? Or is the older lady... One of them has a disability, and I can't remember which one and what it is exactly. But it's just this charming story about this friendship that this girl has with this neighbor. And the family that the little girl... Of course, the little girl and her family are moving. And she's very upset that they're going to be leaving this neighbor who's now her friend. So it was delightful. Absolutely delightful, and I loved it. The next one was another reread. A couple of these were rereads for me, actually. But this is a favorite of mine, an old favorite of mine, and it's Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. I reread this one in May. I love this book so much. I mean, if you want good gothic romance, this is definitely the way to go if you've never read Rebecca, but I'm pretty sure everybody on BookTube at this point has. I just love this story so much, so much. And it is mentioned that it is a slight retelling of Jane Eyre. And did I read Jane Eyre in 2021? I think I might have, or was it in 2020? Regardless, I read Jane Eyre, and then I've now reread, like, I hadn't read Jane Eyre when I read Rebecca the first time, but now that I have, I can definitely see the parallels between the two. And this book is just absolutely fantastic, and I love this edition. I got this from Book Depository. I just think it's so gorgeous. So I'm trying to get all of her books, all of du Maurier's books in this edition, so I can have them on my shelf because they're absolutely beautiful. The next one is another contemporary romance, and we have Crazy Stupid Romance by Lyssa Kay Adams. This I also read in May. This, I believe, is the third book in the Bromance Book Club series. Yeah, I think it's 3 because I have 4 still to read, which is The Russian Story. But this one is a really great story. I love this one so much. I have to say that what really put this one up there for me was the fact that a cat is very much featured in this book. And you guys know I'm a cat lover. So yeah, this one, I adored this book. Again, this is one that people either loved or they hated. I loved it. I thought it was great. Next up, another contemporary romance. We have Sweet Talk by Cara Bastone. Excuse me. This I also read in May. This one is audio exclusive. So it's, as far as I know, at least when I read it, it's only available on audio. And this is one of those books on audio that is so reminiscent of the old time, like, radio broadcast where they would tell, like, the War of the Worlds, like, they would tell you a story. I'm not saying it's like a sci-fi like War of the Worlds. It's a contemporary romance. It's about these two characters, and the one is drunk, and is it her or him? One of them accidentally texts the other person, and then they start this whole relationship via text message, and they don't meet until much, much later. I think even at the very end of the book, the entire relationship takes place over the phone and over text messages, and it is so good. And I mean, these Audible exclusives, I have to say, Audible is doing a bang-up job on some of them because you really get into the story. Like, it's essentially watching a show without actually watching it. You're only listening to it. I don't know how else to describe it. But, like, for example, like, you know, if you were doing a book to like an audio book, and it'd be like, oh, and she pushed out the chair and blah, blah, blah. You don't get that. You actually hear a chair being pushed out. Or in this case, you hear the phone beep for a text message. You know what I mean? So good. I highly recommend it. Next up, we have The Lost Apothecary by Sarah Penner. I read this one in June. This was a really, really great story. It takes place in a dual narrative, like in the past and then in the present day, about a woman who goes to, is it London? And she is about to divorce her husband. Their marriage is on the rocks. And then it goes back in time to this woman who owned an apothecary shop many, 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 moons ago in London, and how their two lives are paralleling a little bit. Really great. I picked this one up on a whim, and I'm so happy that I did because obviously I loved it. Another reread for me, one of my favorite Bridgerton books, but not my favorite, actually. My favorite book is one that I read at the end of 2020. But my second favorite Bridgerton book, Romancing Mr. Bridgerton by Julia Quinn. This is Colin and Penelope's story. For those of you who have watched Bridgerton, and if you've only watched Bridgerton and you have not read the books, please read the books. I will be honest. The first book, The Duke and I, it will still rate a 5-star read for me because it was the start of a series that this was my first foray into historical romance. And that book was like a jumping off point for me for historical romance. And it's a fantastic book. It does have its problems, but it's a fantastic book. But books 2, 3, and 4, this is book 4, are 100% my favorites. If you had to ask me which ones, Anthony's, Benedict's, and Colin's stories are my favorites. So, of course, I do love the relationship between Colin and Penelope. A lot of it is alluded to in Bridgerton, and that's what I mean. I love the show. Don't get me wrong. I think that the show is fantastic. I am, as a lover of these books, a little annoyed at what has taken place in the show because they've alluded to things that don't happen until book 4. So I know it's difficult to do, like when you take a show, and in the case of Bridgerton, these books are like, 400, 300, 400 pages long, and you're trying to put that into a show that is 8 one-hour episodes. You can't. I think it would have worked better if the episodes had been shorter and it would have stuck more to the story. And then, instead of doing like those 8 one-hour episodes, maybe doing 4 episodes for The Duke and I, and then the next 4 episodes of that same season for Anthony's book, The Viscount Who Loved Me, and then season 2 could have been Benedict's story and then Colin's story. Like, that's just my thought process on it, because they brought way too much from later books into that first season. So that's why I'm saying, like, if you guys love the show but you've never read the books, read the book. So yeah, this is Colin and Penelope's story. So in case you're curious which is my favorite book, it is definitely the second book in the series, and I'm always blank on the title of it. An Offer from a Gentleman. An Offer from a Gentleman, which is Benedict's story. I know Benedict is the brother that nobody seems to like. He's kind of like the one brother that, him and Gregory, that kind of like, it's always Colin and Anthony that seem to be like the fan favorites, if you will. But Benedict's story, it's a Cinderella retelling, and it is so good. So good. There is scenes that take place at the end of that book in this jail, that's all I'm going to say, that are just fantastic. But yeah, this one also will always get a 5-star rating from me. Pretty much the first 4 books in Bridgerton will get 5 stars from me. After that, I mean, I like Eloise and Francesca's stories. They're okay. They're about a 4-star. To be honest, Gregory and Hyacinth, they're not my favorites, but whatever. The next book that I have to share with you is the other book that, if I had to give my top 2 of the year, you guys are going to be surprised. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. Like, guys, this was amazing. I was absolutely shocked at how much I loved this. When did I finish this one? This I read in August. I loved this book. I so jumped out of my comfort zone to read this, and it was so good. I don't want to give away too much about what it's about. It's pretty much about a woman who, back in, is it the 1700s in France? I want to say this takes place like over 300 years. Bear with. 1714. So that's when it starts. And she essentially makes a deal with the devil that she doesn't want to marry this guy, but she'll do anything to get out of this small town in France. And she doesn't want to marry this guy, this widower with 3 kids. And so essentially the devil, for lack of a better terminology, he's like, yeah, okay, you can live forever and you can do whatever you want, but no one's ever going to remember you. And the story goes from there. And it goes back to when she was in France, and then along with the time that she's been surviving over the last 300 years. And then it takes place in more modern day, I think it's 2014 New York City. So yeah, fantastic. I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I'm sure everybody and his brother, I think on BookTube, has read this, but I am so happy with it. I loved it, and I think it's definitely one that I would eventually give a reread down the line. The next one that I read was in September, and that's The Woolly Hat Knitting Club by Poppy Dolan. This is a great British chick lit novel. I had this one from NetGalley on audio. I just kind of picked it because it's about a knitting club, and if you guys obviously know I'm the bookish knitter. I love to knit and cross stitch and anything crafty like that. So this one was right up my alley, and it's about a woman who leaves her high-powered job in London to go back to this small town to help her brother with the haberdashery that he owns, and she takes up knitting and gets other people in town involved, and it's just charming, absolutely charming. I highly, highly recommend this one. The next one, the only author to appear on this list twice. We have Missing at Christmas by Katie Richards. This book I read in October. I think it's the third book in the West Investigation series. This one was so, so good. And another great romantic suspense, another great Harlequin intrigue novel. But this one was definitely, I really like this one. I like this one so much, mainly because our female lead in this one, it wasn't the typical that you see a lot in like older romantic suspense where, the guy is going to save the girl. Whereas she's like, no, I'm good. I can save myself. You worry about you, honey. I'm good. And it was fantastic. I really, really, really liked it. Second last book coming out that I read in October, excuse me. Will My Cat Eat My Eyeballs by Caitlin Doughty. I have talked about this book quite a bit. This was like a read for me that I just kind of like saw it at the library. I'm like, all right, I'll read it. I've heard about it. And I love this. So it's questions that Caitlin Doughty has been asked about death from children, like younger people. And she answers them in an honest manner. And it was, okay, there were parts of it that were a little like, okay. But overall, it was really, really interesting. She has a great sense of humor. I can just imagine what she would be like on stage. If she ever, if the world ever gets back to some sort of normal, if she ever goes on tour, I would love to go see her speak live. I adore her as a person. I think she's funny. I think she's very passionate about what it is that she believes in. And this was fantastic. So again, questions about death, but these are not like philosophical questions. These are not, well, what happens after you die? This is scientifically what happens. Like the title question is, would my cat eat my eyeballs? And there's another one in here about like, what happens if you die on a plane? What happens to your body? Kind of an idea. And she answers them honestly. She doesn't hold anything back just because this is geared towards children. And I think that's what I really appreciated about it. She didn't get too much into it because, again, for children. But she didn't hold anything back. She didn't hold a lot back either, if that makes sense. And the final book that I read, and I believe this one, I don't think I had any 5 stars in December. No, this was in November. The last book, my last 5-star read of the year, was Broken in the Best Possible Way by Jenny Lawson. I listened to this one on audio, but I did have to buy a physical copy. I'm a big, big fan of her. She's the blogess online. She deals a lot with mental illness. And these are essentially essays of her struggles day to day, the ups and the downs of having these mental illnesses that she deals with. And I listened to this on audio from my library. She narrates it, and it was fantastic. I've loved all 3 of her books so far. Let's Pretend This Never Happened, Furiously Happy, and then this one. And I've loved all of them. And there's something, even though I don't deal with mental illness, thankfully. I do have a chronic illness that I do deal with. So in that aspect, I can understand some of the struggles that she goes through. There is parts of this book that are absolutely hilarious, that you're just laughing out loud. Like I was listening to it on my way to work in the car and was just killing myself laughing. And then the next chapter, she would be talking, she did this, what was it? An open letter to her insurance company. And as a Canadian, it's not anything that I could understand, but how her doctor or her psychiatrist or what have you has put her on this medication that is potentially going to save her life. It is something that is going to essentially, hopefully, stop her from committing suicide potentially, right? Because of her depression. And her insurance company will not pay for it because they don't think it's needed. And I just can't even imagine. I just can't even imagine, being in that kind of a situation. Now, we do have to pay for prescriptions up here, but, I guess that the insurance companies up here are a little bit different. I don't know, but I've never heard of anything like that. I mean, maybe I'm speaking out of turn. I've never had to deal with that myself, with being denied a medication from my insurance provider through, whatever. But yeah, so again, hilarious and heartfelt all in one. If you've never read Jenny Lawson, you need to read her. She's fantastic. And yeah, I enjoyed this one a lot, obviously. So anyway, guys, that is it for this video. I do hope that you enjoyed it. It was probably a little bit longer than normal, and sorry for the cuts and the splices. It is what it is. And until my next one, everybody, take care and happy reading. Thank you all so much for watching. Bye, guys.